public.
Nothing's gonna
meeting.
happen today, Jack,
Yeah,
other
nothing's
than
happening.
Well, other
whether
than-
they
other
wanna
than-
move forward with a preparation of a resolution.
I understand
They're
that,
not voting on the
but then it's a
resolution.
very easy next step to go forward. But as long as you commit to having a public meeting in between, then it gives the residents and it gives a few other people a chance to educate themselves about what this implication is, because it sounds like a big deal, it's pretty unusual. It sounds like High Point would be a good CRA location, right?
Are you planning
Could
to
be.
develop
No,
that?
I'm not. That's
I'm
a
all for it.
rhetorical question, I don't need an answer on it.
Would the
Maybe we should.
get into development.
Maybe it's a tool, yeah.
Would the resolution need to indicate the percent of abatement? Mr. Miller?
Well, again, I don't know why I can never hear you.
Would the resolution need to indicate the percent of abatement?
Yeah, that would be, the county is the one that actually adopts it, but you would be telling them, here's what we would like to see. So yes, I would presume that.
I don't know,
Actually-
please, I have a follow-up. I don't know how a trustee could make a recommendation as a fiduciary without understanding the dollar amounts that you're making that recommendation on.
Greg?
Actually, the county makes that determination based on whether or not we have an agreement with the school board.
Yeah.
which
The
we do.
percentage.
And the percentage will be for the commercial, 100% for 15 years, based on an agreement with the Deer Park School Board.
Okay, so that's your opinion. That's not the trustee's
Because the property
decision,
is in Deer
correct?
Park. That's not the trustee's decision.
So the trustees do not get to decide what percent abatement is in the CRA.
That's correct.
That's correct.
And in fact, the county can do this even if you gentlemen say we
That's
don't like
correct.
this idea.
If we say no, they can say yes. If we say yes, they can say no. It's up to the county to decide whether this is gonna go through and be sent to the state or not.
Is this the county commissioners or HCDC?
This is ACDC presenting to the county commissioners on,
So the commissioners would have to approve?
that's correct.
Okay.
The commissioners have final authority in this matter.
Yeah, yes.
Well, the state of Ohio is final.
The state of Ohio has final authority, but they're gonna,
Well, yeah.
to get over to the next hurdle, they're gonna vote on it, correct.
It's still the final ballot.
Only counties or municipalities can do this,
Hey, Greg,
so it's up to them.
you said Anderson Township has a CRA. Is that property in the back there, the apartment complex, was gonna be a theater at one time?
Yeah, that
Yes.
whole
Is that
area
the property?
surrounding.
Yeah, now
Anderson
that I can understand that would be, that's a very difficult site. And they've had any number of proposals on that.
Well, they can't develop it because they can't afford the public infrastructure.
Right.
Which is why it sits there,
Right,
which
right.
is, I think, the reason for this request. The board supported, won this request, and in order to make this request successful, this is the task in front of them.
Yeah, at first I thought you talked about Anderson Township, the shopping center, but this is.
That may be
this is-
part of it, that may
I
be
think it
part
is part of it.
It may be part of it, I don't have their exact boundary.
I think it
Well,
might
it
be.
might be, yeah. Okay, but that part of it is very difficult, and it's understandable. This site, I'm not so sure.
And shouldn't we really know where Deer Park School stands on this before we go in? We're talking about 100%, 50% difference, and some numbers you toss with.
Well, I think the way that we have it laid out is you get 50% if there's no school district agreement, and then you get whatever the school district agreement is. So, do you need to know where Deer Park is? At some point you will, but you're setting up to say, if you don't have a school district agreement, you get the minimum. If you have a school district agreement, you get what the school district agreement
It's
is.
the obligation of the developer to create an agreement with the school district, so.
Which we have.
But I think we want to be part of that because the judge's involved and
Sure.
we want to make sure that they are accepting what the developer is giving them in full and not looking toward any payment of the income tax as additional compensation.
Okay.
Let me just comment on what Mr. Bickford said about, well, this is why we need to go forward with this wonderful development. I think most people in this room would question whether it's a depressed area. And for Mr. Casero's benefit, if I did in fact say, boy, I'm wild by this development, as we proceeded, it was not consistent with local zoning. Regional planning recommended rejection of it because it was too dense. Sycamore Township zoning board said no to this. The vote was 4-1, and the community overwhelmingly objected to this in about 30 hours of testimony and 8 public meetings. So when I turned down the TIF that night, I made a mistake in saying that. I should have let you go forward with that TIF, and then turned it down. And I was reflecting the views of the people. I think it's still way too dense. Then you made an attempt to go to the Hamilton County Commissioners to get a TIF there, which was in progress. But I went down to talk to some people there. So then that didn't look like maybe that wouldn't happen. So then what did we do? Let's go around and change the law for the whole state of Ohio. So that is still, could come back in a conference committee. The governor called me on Thursday to tell me that it wasn't in the Senate budget, but could come back in the conference committee. And so now there's another tool here, the CRA, and another way to go around the will of the people in Sycamore Township. You know, all could be averted, but this should all be put aside, just downsize it, that's all. No attempt at all from day one was made to downsize. And you and I talked about this, okay, maybe in December we said this, but afterwards, you know, we talked about, hey, this is too massive. This is, look at the traffic study, everything. So that's my thought at this point.
Okay, any other comments? If not, we'll take a motion.
I would introduce a motion to direct the law director to prepare a resolution in support of the CRA based on the conditions described in Mr. Victor's presentation.
Okay, I'll second. Any further discussion?
My only further discussion is that I think Mr. Fusaro said what I assumed that this was all along is an alternative means of financing the infrastructure of the project. They brought it to HCDC. HCDC considered it to be a legitimate potential CRA designation, and that's why it came to us, and so that's why I feel like we have already voted 2-1, and I saw all the T-shirts. I know that there are people who don't support the decision, but we felt that in the best interest of the entire township, we voted in favor of this project, and this is a legitimate legal potential way to help fund the infrastructure, so I see no reason why we shouldn't bring a resolution back and talk about it.
Okay.
Then again, I'm gonna just say, you've gone around the will of the people for a private developer. That's all.
Okay. This is a, CRAs are used all over Hamilton County. They're used for infrastructure improvement, and I don't know that I don't have any opposition to using it in this situation as well. I think that they will be public improvements and not private improvements. They're obligated under the agreement, the CRA agreement, to use it only for public improvements and not for private improvements. So I have no opposition to it, and if there are no other comments, Mr. Porter.
Mr. LaBarbera?
No,
Mr. Connor?
Aye.
Mr. Whedon?
Aye. Okay, next item is festive court vacation review. Hamilton County, this is a request by the Hamilton County engineer. Mr. Baker.
Staying along the lines of this project, this is a township-controlled right-of-way, and in order for when township-controlled right-of-way is to be vacated, the ORC requires the request be handed over to the county engineer, to the county commissioners. In this particular case, we have common property ownership on all sides of this existing festive court. The request is to vacate the right-of-way and turn it over to the private property individuals. The county is looking for comment from us on whether or not it should be vacated. If we provide no comment to them, they will assume the road to be vacated. The county commissioners will then vacate it and the property will be divided up amongst the adjoining property owners equitably, and those, the roadway will then no longer appear on our publicly dedicated roadways. Just some comments that Tracy's on vacation. From our standpoint, this is common ownership. There's not one property owned by someone else who would not, still need the access. So from our standpoint, if the road is vacated, it then becomes a private drive, should no development occur, and the properties remain as is, and this in the long run saves Sycamore Township money. The developer, the property owners, I should say, would be responsible for any public infrastructure inside of the right-of-way to become private infrastructure. So from the township standpoint, I'm talking with Tracy, there are no issues with us vacating this particular road. Fire and EMS would still have access if necessary. So that's staff's comments on the issue.
Okay.
And then
Any
just to
comments?
put, there's obviously the road, but just to put it in perspective, aerial photograph again, area in question, just showing you here, Pheasant Court.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
A question, this process generally takes place in advance of, go ahead on a project?
Well, it can take place at any time. If, for example, in High Point, there was a bunch of alleyways behind the properties, and there was no development plan, it was just, the right-of-way was vacated and turned over to the adjoining property owners. This is a request from a property owner. At this point, if it's vacated, it's vacated, and the property moves on. In order for the project to start, it would have to be vacated, but just because we vacate it doesn't mean the project has to start instantly. I guess, I hope that answers.
So basically it becomes a private drive?
It's a private drive, yes.
What's the timetable on that, Craig?
For vacation,
Yeah.
I think it's a 90-day window. By the time you pass notification, the county has to go through their process. They have to decertify the right-of-way. New deeds would have to be drawn up and conveyed to the adjoining property owner, so it's about a 90-day process.
Okay.
Once we pass this point.
Okay, so my only concern would be, of course, if you had any existing tenants still living there, but I think they have 60 days left to relocate, is that correct?
That is correct. We gave a 90-day notice over 30 days ago. We did a 60-day notice last week.
Okay.
So they have basically 60 days from now.
I mean, obviously, we probably wouldn't want to vacate that prior to
No, absolutely
all
not.
of your
Yeah.
tenants moving out.
Right.
Okay.
And Greg,
And that 90-day window would allow that then?
According to Ted Hubbard, then, if he doesn't hear from us by July 3rd, he will assume there's no interest and we'll move forward.
That's correct, that's my understanding.
Quick comment on that issue, sir?
Yes.
I believe this topic is on the agenda for the Hamilton County Commissioners for their Thursday afternoon meeting, Thursday meeting, which I believe is one of the ones for the offsite. So this very topic is already on their agenda for them to vote upon. I think that's important for all of us here to be aware of.
Well, that's an agenda set by the county, that's not set by us.
But they're gonna vote upon this issue, sir. That's what my comment is.
Well, there may be
You're
just,
mentioning 30 days of hearings, and it sounds like they're already gonna go vote upon it.
I don't know if they're voting on it because the indication from the county engineer said they don't need an answer from the township until July 2nd, so I don't know what they'd be voting on. They may just be discussing it, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Mr. Bickford, who actually owns title to the land under Festive Court? If it belongs to the township or if the township controls the right of way, that's very valuable property that seems to be in great demand by someone right now. I would think there'd be compensation due, but who owns that?
As far as I know, it's dedicated right away, so it's not in fee. So there is not an ownership fee simple deed to it, it's just considered public right of way.
Well, the engineer's letter to the township referred to it being in fee.
Well, but I think it's also dedicated as part of the subdivision plat, so there's no parcel number assigned to it.
It says it's a fee right away.
Right, so that's.
It's a township road, so, I don't
You'd have,
know.
you'd have to do the deed research to find out if the parcel exists.
I think Mr. Miller would agree if this is actually township-owned land, and I don't know that it is, but if it were, then giving that up would require a unanimous vote of the trustees to change the title of the land by selling it or conveying it.
No, we don't do that, the county does. County vacates any right of way and they have the process in place, and they have a process, two different processes actually, whether it's owned in fee or whether it's by easement. Some roads, they only have,
Right, I
the
understand
right
that
of way
as,
is held by easement.
I understand that as to right of way. If it were actually held in fee title by the township, on the other hand, as to the ground, it would be something that would
Yeah,
require.
no, it's not like it's a parcel that we
Okay.
own. It's the right of way that is a township road that we're responsible for maintaining. But the trustees can't do the vacation, the county
Right.
has to.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, I think we'll need a resolution.
We do that by resolution.
No, you do it by just motion if you choose to make a comment, you don't need a resolution.
They just indicated they want
Okay.
something in writing as to what the township feeling is.
Okay,
I guess then we'll make a motion to allow the county to vacate the property.
okay, I'll second. Any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Ms. LaBarber,
No,
Mr. Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Weedman.
Aye. Purchase orders over $2,500.
I just have one for your consideration. This is for Seasons Retirement Facility on Montgomery Road. This is for temporary and standard highway easement on Montgomery Road for the sidewalk project. That is gonna be beginning construction later this year. $24,999.
Motion to approve?
motion. Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Mr. Porter?
Ms. LaBarber,
Aye.
Mr. Connor,
Aye.
Mr. Weedman.
Aye. I'd just like to, going back to the HCDC, I'd just like to mention, Greg, would you facilitate that, to have somebody come to our workshop? Next
Sure.
workshop?
Well, I thought you were gonna have excuse me, I thought the whole idea of, having them come to the meeting, the HCDC, was you were gonna create a special night and have an open house. That was my impression, and
We're
I
not gonna,
believe,
we're not gonna do that.
you just changed your mind on it. We
I
were
never
just
said
talking
that,
about
I
that.
never said that. I said we're gonna have it at a public meeting. Our meetings are public meetings.
Okay, so the next workshop then, that's gonna be at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that your request, so I get them at the July 2nd workshop, is that what you want?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our next meeting, right? We don't meet until,
Correct.
that's gonna be our next meeting, so I'd say let's get them at our next meeting.
All right, I'll talk to.
I'd like to have, just let me go on record saying I'd like to have it at an open house meeting where you can have it in the evening where residents can in fact attend.
Tom, I'm kind of lost track of the dates now. I thought that you agreed, when you and I were talking before, you agreed to have a public meeting to discuss this prior to you acting
No, I
on
never
this
said that.
resolution.
You just said a public meeting, and all I said was, yeah, we'll have it at a public meeting. Our meetings are public
Well, if we're
meetings.
gonna parse the sentence that closely, mine, that was not my
You're doing that,
understanding, and I'm
Jack.
sorry about that, but I think it's important, because this is really a big deal, that we have a public meeting before you take formal action as a board of trustees.
So we will have comments, we will allow comments prior to any vote on this for anybody in the public who wants to come and who has concerns about it. I don't know what.
Well, I understand
Where's
that.
the issue?
The issue is that this project has been extraordinarily divisive and extraordinarily impactful of our community. I think everybody would agree on that. So I think that we should need to take very careful steps as we move forward on this to make sure that we have, and I use that word, a transparent process. And a public meeting before you take formal action would be appropriate, Tom.
So we will have public comment prior to any action we take. What's the issue with that, Jack?
The issue
other
is.
than trying to
this
stall
issue-
the entire.
Yeah.
No, we're not trying to
Yeah, you
stall,
are.
we're not trying to stall anything.
Jack, come on.
We're not trying to stall anything.
Yeah, you are.
Can we move on?
Oh, wait, hold on, wait a second.
I don't wanna debate with Mr. Fucero, but the point is that business as usual isn't appropriate, isn't good enough in this instance, Tom.
Okay,
Excuse me, we could have it before the workshop. We could even have that meeting, open meeting before the workshop, not stalling the project, because the thing is not gonna happen until the next workshop anyway, or the next regular meeting. So that open meeting can happen, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, any night. So it's not the stall project, process.
okay, any thoughts?
I'll go with whatever the board decides.
You were one of those three votes, so I didn't know what your.
If we invite the HCDC representative to the workshop, we allow him to make a presentation, we allow the public to make comments. That all takes place in advance of the resolution. To my mind, that satisfies the requirements. If the other two of you decide that we want to have an additional meeting in the evening to talk about it even more, that's fine too.
Greg, you wanna weigh in on that at all?
So right now, I'm scheduling July second, get HCDC out here. You know, you had your discussion about this development for 30-some hours. I think opinions are clear on the development. If you want it to be successful, then this is the process you undertake. If you wanna hold a public meeting night, that's fine, but I think as you've seen, you're gonna get the same arguments you've gotten for the 30-plus hours you've had in public hearing. That's my 2 cents on the issue, but I will do whatever the board wants, and as of right now, I'm trying to get HCDC out here for July 2nd.
Okay,
Is it July 2nd, is that an evening meeting or a workshop meeting?
where's the workshop?
See, look at the people that are here this morning, there's, the same faces. I'm retired, semi-retired. The evening meetings allow all the other working people in this area to attend. They can't be here at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday, they're working. Or they're taking care of their kids, or, or whatever.
We'll also take written, I know you'll be talking to a lot of the people, we'll take written opinions as well, and we'll put them in the record as well, so. We have an executive session for the purposes of property acquisition.
Before you make that motion, that was actually put on from Mr. Miller in case he needed it. I just wanna verify if you do or don't need it.
I do not, well, there's another property that I'd like to talk about, so potentially, and I would also like to, for a discussion with the attorney